Welcome to Monday Night Live, the weekly training that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and start building your wealth.
So everybody, I'll go ahead and kick this one off. I met Anthony and Cameron, well, it had to be easily 4, maybe 5 years ago, through the podcast circuit. And then they had a podcast, I had a podcast, and I invited them to teach class. And the subject is really intriguing. It's becoming more and more popular, but there's people, uh, just like anything in life, in a free market economy, you've got a choice in the matter. You know, who you go with, who you work with, and things like that. And with these guys, I mean, I can tell you unabashedly, absolutely the top of the top, cream of the crop, A plus gold standard, um, true gentlemen and excellent business partners. So this is the kind of thing I want you to listen to this.
Mhm.
Think of this through the lens of your clients, not just for yourselves, but for your clients, because your clients and Anthony and Cameron's clients are actually one and the same. So just keep this in mind. How can you apply this to your clientele? Okay. So in any case, if you guys want to go ahead and kick it off, Anthony and Cameron, go right ahead, and I'll keep an eye on things here for you.
Okay, perfect. All right, Cam's going to go first. You want to give him a little heads up of what we're talking about, Cam?
Sure. Because what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be introducing you to the infinite banking concept. What our intention is, Anthony and I have been in this space for almost 20 years. Our intention is to help people achieve financial freedom. And the way that we define financial freedom is this equation right here on the shirt, is having our passive income exceed our monthly expenses. And so what we're going to introduce you to, one is going to be kind of the system that we help clients implement. But then also, I'm going to be talking about it kind of at a theoretical or kind of conceptual level. And then I'm going to turn it over to Anthony. Anthony's going to dive into the numbers, and he is going to prove to you that by implementing the system, you guys will end up with more, right? More money at the end of the day by adding this to what you guys are doing. One of the reasons that we appreciate Gary inviting us on is because, like Anthony mentioned, we do like doing these is because they are interactive. If you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on. If it's something urgent, I'm happy to address it. To kick this off, if you guys don't mind, I'll ask you maybe two things. One is in the chat box, maybe drop in where you guys are joining us from. So whatever city, state that you guys are from. Anthony and I are out here in Las Vegas, Nevada. But also number two is I'd ask you to drop in the chat box if you guys have ever heard of infinite banking, put a 1. If you guys have no idea what I'm talking about when I say infinite banking, put a 2. And maybe if you guys have heard about infinite banking but just haven't implemented it yet, maybe put a 3 in there for me. Good.
Gary, can I just be clear on what the time frame is? Like, when do you
Yeah,
want us to stop yapping?
yeah, we try. It's advertised as being an hour long, but honestly,
Okay.
guys, we've wrapped up in 45 minutes. We've had a class literally go a couple of past 2.5 hours, but an hour is what
Okay.
we tell people. Yeah, so
I will
Don't
tell
tell
you,
don't tell Anthony 2.5 hours. He'll
yeah,
shoot for the record. He'll go
yeah,
for 3,
don't worry.
right? Yeah.
I will tell you, I will make sure we're wrapped up by the end of the hour, if not sooner. But maybe we can stay a little bit for questions, but we're not going to drag this out.
Yeah. Awesome,
okay.
guys. I appreciate you jumping in and interacting here. We've got some 2s, which is not quite sure what we're talking about. And then I do see a couple 3s, right? We've heard about it, just haven't implemented it yet. So,
Mhm.
what I'll share with you guys is really my goal today is pretty simple, is I want to show you guys how to create more passive income and achieve financial freedom, not by working any harder or taking on more risk, but becoming more efficient with the capital that you guys already have. What Anthony and I discovered by doing this over the last 20 years is that most people out there do not have an investment problem. What we do have is they have a cash flow and we have a control problem. So everybody out there is taught where to invest, what to buy, what returns to chase, but almost nobody out there has taught us where our money should go before we ever invest it. And that's the one missing step that is out there quietly keeping people behind, right? And it slows everything down. So today we're going to focus on a different question. And that question is, where should my money live so that it stays accessible, it stays growing, and it remains under our control before we ever deploy it into some sort of investment?
Okay.
Everything that we're going to talk about today is going to be built around one simple idea, and that is creating financial freedom. And as I mentioned in the introduction, financial freedom for us is passive income, which is money that we don't work for, being greater than our monthly expenses. That's it. That is the goal. When I sit and talk to somebody and I ask them, what are you really trying to achieve financially? I usually get maybe two, three, maybe four kind of surface level answers. But once you keep digging, it really comes down to, you know what? What I really want is I want time. Is I want money coming in that I don't work for so that I can go do what I want. I want to spend time with loved ones. I want to go do all my hobbies. And so that is it. That's why we have had this focus for the last 20 years. And so if the decisions that we make need to be based upon that one simple question. And that question is, does this move us closer to financial freedom or does it get us further away? If that's the goal, let me ask you a couple questions here. Is what if there was a simple, proven system that could help you build more passive income? What if it could provide you access and allow you guys to keep more of the money that you already have? And what if it could also help you guys build generational wealth, where we're not only thinking of ourselves, but we're thinking 50 to maybe even 100 years down the road? And what if we could do this without having to change where you guys invest? If all of this is possible, more income, more control, more efficiency, then the real question becomes, what is actually getting in our way? What is it that's holding everyone back? Because for most people, it is not a lack of effort. We are all out there working hard, we're earning a good income, we're investing, yet at the end of the day, it still feels like we're not quite able to get ahead, which tells us something. That something is that whatever we're doing isn't quite working. When we step back and we take a look at what's happening financially for most people, we start to notice the same patterns showing up again and again. It does not matter how much money somebody makes, what industry that we're in, or how hard we're working, these patterns show up time and time again. And these patterns, again, are the same things that keep us quietly stuck where we're at. The three patterns that we see most often are number one, is I'm really good at making money. But you know what I'm even better at? Spending it. If you guys have ever felt that way in life, please drop a one in the chat for me. Whoa. Whoa.
Guilty as
Hang on.
charged.
Let me back up here.
Those are my slides, Cameron. Okay, don't go showing my part.
I know you got all excited. I gave him a
Yeah,
little
I'm gonna do
preview.
the numbers. We're gonna get into the good stuff when I get in there.
The second, make sure I got the right screen, screen 5. Perfect. The second pattern that we see most often is somebody comes to us and they say, hey, in my business, in my industry, my profession, I have money coming in, but it's seasonal. It ebbs and it flows and it's never reliable. And it is this inconsistent cash flow that creates stress because we're never quite certain what's going to come next. If you guys have ever felt that way, drop a 2 in the chat for me. When this inconsistent cash flow goes on long enough, what happens is you start to think these thoughts, right? As I'm a little bit older, I'm frustrated. And to be honest, I might be a little bit embarrassed that I'm not further along. I thought I would be closer to this financial freedom goal than I actually am. I would guess many of you have experienced this at some point. Maybe some of you guys are experiencing this right now. But here's the reality is that those are symptoms. Those are not the cause. All of those symptoms come from one place. Here's the part that most people never stop to think about is the traditional way that we've been taught to think about money is actually working against us. Think about it. The normal flow of money is income comes in, it hits our checking account, and then immediately it almost disappears. It gets spent, it gets transferred, it gets invested, it gets allocated somewhere else before we ever intentionally control it. And for most people, that money typically goes to one of two places. The first one is it gets spent for lifestyle, but the second one is it gets redirected into what we call money traps, places where money becomes inaccessible, inefficient, and ultimately out of our control. And this cycle repeats itself over and over again every single month. And for most people, this is what their financial life looks like right now. Is we've got income that comes in where everything flows into one big main checking account, and that one account is expected to do everything. If you guys are in this situation, drop a 5 in the chat box for me, right? If you have everything going into one big main account at the beginning of the month, drop a 5. Around here, we jokingly call this the superhero account because this account is trying to handle all things. It's trying to handle the spending, it's trying to handle the savings, the investing, the emergencies, the bills, debt payments, all that stuff. When one account is trying to perform all those functions, your financial life becomes reactive instead of intentional. Money comes in, money goes out, but there's very little structure, very little control over the actual flow of capital. So if we're being honest, right, many of us, our financial lives actually look like this, is you are in a rat race. You feel it every month, right? You run, you get to the end of the month and there's not enough money left over in the account. And you're like, what in the heck happened? It is extremely difficult when you have money coming into one big main account and you're trying to pay all the bills, save and invest, time out all the drafts. The only thing that this leads to is confusion. And when there's no clear system, finances, again, they become reactive and they become chaotic. Escaping the rat race is not about running faster. It's not about working harder. You cannot outrun confusion and you cannot outrun chaos. The real shift financially happens when you step off this hamster wheel and you implement a system that gives you clarity, it gives you structure, and it gives you control over the money that you have coming in. The question then becomes, what does an intentional financial system actually look like? We have found that every efficient financial system, whether it's a bank, whether it's a business, whether it's a generational wealthy family, follows 3 simple steps: redirect, leverage, and repeat. Becoming more efficient with our money is not about finding better investments. It's about finding a better place for our capital to reside. So the first one, redirect, is we have to redirect our money to where our money flows, because where our money flows and ultimately resides determines what we can and cannot do with it. Second, we have to leverage those dollars so that they can be used without stopping the growth. And this is called compounding. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. And thirdly is we need to recycle the capital so that the same dollars can be used over and over and over again. Of the 3 of these topics, the most important one is going to be redirection. If your dollars are consistently being directed to the wrong places, your momentum will stall out, your cash flow is going to get trapped, and your capital becomes stagnant and inefficient. Before we talk about where the money should go, I want to take a minute and look at where most people are currently sending their dollars. And for the vast majority of people, their money is flowing into what we call money traps. The biggest money trap that we see day in and day out is actually qualified plans. If you guys have qualified plans, drop a 6 in the chat box for me. That'd be a 401k, that'd be an IRA, that'd be a 403b. Every single day we get questions about these accounts. What about my 401k? What about the company match? What about my IRA? What about my TSP? Guys, I'm not here to tell you that there's anything wrong with those accounts. All right. But I will say that if anybody on this call is looking to create cash flow now today, it is nearly impossible to do it out of those accounts. It's not whether those accounts are good or bad. It is it's about the control. And what we need to ask is, what happens to your control once the money goes in? Because the moment that you place money into a qualified plan is you are giving up access and you're giving up control of those dollars in exchange for a future promise. In many ways, it's like handing your money to a prison warden and giving them the keys. Your money becomes restricted, it becomes penalized, becomes heavily regulated until almost 60 years old. So while most people are doing this and they think they're approaching or getting closer to financial freedom, the reality is they're actually delaying it. I once had a client say it like this, and I love the way that he put this. He said, I had no idea how much time it was costing me to invest in my IRA. He was not talking about the time that he spent checking statements or checking the accounts. What he realized, which actually much deeper than that, he realized that every dollar that was being directed into that account was actually moving him further away from control and access today while postponing the use of that money till later in life. And that creates a major problem for anyone seeking financial freedom today. Because, yes, we need two things. We need our money to grow, but we also need access to it. And this is where most people get financially stuck. Almost every traditional place that we've been taught to store money forces some kind of trade-off. You either get growth without access, or you get access without growth. Rarely do we ever get both. And that leads us to the second major money trap that we see. Second major money trap is cash. Cash is important. It gives us flexibility. It gives us liquidity. It gives us access. All those things are really important. But the problem is that while our cash is typically sitting there, it's not doing much of anything for us. It's slowly being eroded away by inflation, taxes, and lost opportunity. So cash, even though cash feels safe, right? When you pull up the app on your phone and you look at your balance and it's got a nice high balance in there, that feels safe to us. Idle cash is actually becomes very expensive over time. And so now we're becoming in the same spot, right? Is we're in the exact same problem is we need growth and we need access. What I find funny or interesting is that this problem is not new at all. Some of the most successful investors in the world have been debating this exact issue for decades. I know you guys have heard quotes like cash is king or cash is trash. And what they're really debating is this tension, this trade-off between liquidity and access versus growth and inefficiency. Everyone understands that cash gives you flexibility, but nobody wants their money sitting idle. So the real question is, where can we store cash so it remains liquid, accessible, and productive all at the same time? And this is the problem that the infinite banking strategy solves. Almost 20 years ago, I was introduced to the infinite banking concept, and what stuck with me immediately was how simple the core idea actually is. Infinite banking is a system that allows your money to do two things at the same time. It allows your money to continue to grow while still being available for us to use. And that is the missing piece that everybody misses. They step over it. Your money never has to stop working for you just because you decided to put it somewhere else. Instead of storing money in places where it either sits idle or becomes inaccessible, we store it inside a properly designed dividend-paying whole life policy. Then, when opportunities show up, we don't withdraw the money and interrupt the growth. We simply borrow against it, which means the same dollar can continue compounding in one place while also being deployed somewhere else. That right there is the entire concept of the infinite banking idea. Control the money first, and everything else becomes more efficient afterwards. The goal is to create a more efficient system for the money before it ever reaches the investment. Now, before Anthony walks you guys through some of those examples, we do need to have kind of a working understanding of the product and how this thing works. So when we start to look at whole life, is we have a tremendous opportunity when it comes to designing the policy. Every whole life policy has two primary components. One is going to be the death benefit, and then two is going to be the cash value. Most people are traditionally sold policies that emphasize the death benefit first, with very little focus, almost none, on building accessible cash value. With infinite banking, we intentionally design the policy almost the exact opposite. Our objective is to maximize the amount of premium money that we're sending into the policy and creating cash value while we minimize the death benefit. The reason that we want this to happen is because we want the policy functioning primarily as a place to keep capital and then a financing system, not as a death benefit product. It's the exact opposite how most people have been told how whole life works. In Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, if you guys have heard of that book, please drop a 7 in the chat for me. He conclusively proves that a properly designed dividend paying whole life policy is the most efficient place to store capital. Not because it's flashy, not because it gives us the highest rate of return, but because of what it allows you to do, because of what it allows your money to do at the same time. The attributes that stood out to me were simple. One is my money stays liquid, but also stays protected and it grows, right? That combination, again, is rarely found in the financial world. When I understood that my cash value would have these attributes, I started implementing the strategy for myself personally and then also for my business. Over time, I started sharing what I was doing on a business level with other business owners that I knew, and it ended up kind of becoming a resource and started educating people on this strategy over 20 years ago. When I started looking at this, one of the first questions I had, and one of the most often asked questions that I still get today is they say, wait, I thought whole life insurance was a terrible investment. The reality is that whole life was never meant to be viewed primarily as an investment in the first place. It is simply a tool. And like any tool, the question is, how do we plan on using it? It's not whether it's good or bad. Is how are we going to use it? Most people, again, are introduced to whole life, very traditional, death benefit focused way. What we're going to be talking about is using it completely different and building out that cash value. I was blown away when I started looking at this. One of the things that really caught my attention way back when was I started looking at where banks, corporations, and wealthy families were storing large amounts of their capital. And at the time, my wife and I were introduced to this. We were banking with Wells Fargo. And so I started researching if they were using this strategy. I looked up how much real estate Wells Fargo owned at the time, and the number was staggering. They owned $11 billion worth of real estate. That's 11 billion with a B. That number to me at the time, it made sense because I'm in Vegas and I could drive around town and I could see a branch pretty much on every major street corner. But then I came across something that, to be honest, I really couldn't comprehend at the time is Wells Fargo was holding almost twice as much cash value life insurance as they did in real estate. They were holding just over 19 billion. When I saw that, that completely changed how I looked at this product a whole life. Because whether or not we like banks or not, they understand capital, they know how money works, and they understand efficiency. And that got me asking several questions. One is, what do these institutions understand about money and capital that I don't? Or what do they know that I was never taught? And then what are they doing differently? And what I discovered was fascinating is they weren't just making small tweaks to the advice that I was getting, is they were doing the exact opposite. They were using whole life insurance as a place to store their capital and using it as a financial tool. The banks, excuse me, banks don't buy billions of dollars of life insurance every year because they need the death benefit. They put billions into life insurance because it provides them with access to capital. The same opportunity, if we design it to the way that they are using it, is also available to us now today too. So we've addressed the first major question is where should our money live or reside to maintain control, liquidity, and this compounding growth? The next question becomes, how do we actually put that money to work efficiently? And this is where leverage enters the conversation. Leverage often gets misunderstood. When I say leverage, I'm not talking about reckless debt or taking on unnecessary risk. What I'm talking about is increasing the efficiency of each dollar that we have. True leverage is what allows our money to perform more jobs than once at the same time. So instead of us being forced to choose between growth or access, we can structure things that our money can do both of those at the same time. The goal is not to borrow money for the sake of borrowing money. The goal is to never interrupt the compounding of the growth of our dollars. Let me give you guys an example. This is the part where I would say that most people will overlook when they look at infinite banking. When people evaluate opportunities, they usually focus on the investment, the deal, the return, but very few people stop to take a look at where the money should be going before the investment. The investment alone is not what creates the advantage. It is the flow of money, the structure that creates the advantage. When we use infinite banking, and leverage our cash value, we allow the money to continue working in multiple places at the same time. What we do is we direct our capital to a dividend-paying whole life policy with a mutual company. Then we borrow against the cash value and invest in an asset that cash flows and ideally appreciates. We leverage our capital by taking interest-only loans and get the cash value of our policy. We do not need to make principal and interest payments and we have a loan outstanding. It is interest only. Most people at this stage hear that and they say, well, how does that work? This is the piece that you guys are going to be more familiar with than the average individual out there, but this is the piece, in my opinion, that changes everything. In this strategy, what they're going to do is they're going to use the cash value in your policy as collateral. And if you guys have ever taken a home equity line of credit against your house, you know that your home value did not go down when you drew on that loan. The bank used your home's equity as collateral and then lent you the money. It's the same process that's happening here. Next question, some people will say, well, wait a second, wouldn't paying cash be cheaper? If I had the cash, why would I ever put it over here into cash value and then borrow against it? I do not see how that will benefit me. Why would I do that? Most people will build up cash in traditional places. And then when an investment opportunity comes along, they pull the money out and they go use it. But the moment that that money leaves the account, the compounding on those dollars stop. And that's the part that almost nobody thinks about. Because when you interrupt the growth, you don't just lose this year's growth, you lose every year's future growth into perpetuity. If you're anything like me, what I would do is I would repeat this cycle of taking money out of my account, my balance would drop down to zero. I would do this over and over and over again. And I would think that this is the most responsible thing I could do, to be honest, because that's what my parents have told me to do, is just operate on a cash basis and avoid debt. When I realized that this is the single greatest financial mistake that people are making right now, simply because we don't recognize that there's a cost when we do this. I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'll ask you to drop the answer in the chat box. But if I were to ask you guys when you want your money to stop working for you, what would you say?
When do we want it to stop working for us?
Yeah. Rob says never. PF says never. Gary says never. Robert says never. The obvious answer is never. But most people are unknowingly stop the growth of their money all the time. Every time cash gets pulled out for an opportunity, the growth is stopped permanently. Economists call this lost opportunity cost. Nelson Nash, in his book, he called it one of the biggest blind spots in personal finance. Let's take a second and let's start to connect the dots and simplify kind of all this stuff here. Number one is I want to be clear. The policy is not the investment. The policy is just the place where we're going to keep our capital. It's the place where our money stays liquid, it stays accessible, and it's going to continue to grow for us. Instead of withdrawing our money from the policy and interrupting that growth, we're going to borrow against the policy, the cash value, and deploy it into an opportunity. The opportunities that our clients are investing in, it could be anything. It's going to be real estate, it's going to be business, private lending, purchasing equipment, expansion capital, anything like that. If we do it this way, your money will never leave the compounding or the growth environment. The insurance company will simply use your cash value as collateral and then lend you money against it. What that means is that your capital continues to grow and the asset has the opportunity to produce cash flow, and the cash flow can then be recycled back into your system over and over again. That is the infinite banking system. Once you understand that, you're going to start thinking like a consumer of capital and start thinking like the owner of a banking system. Let me show you how expensive it is to interrupt the compounding of your dollars. Imagine you had $25,000 today and you said, I'm going to make an investment to start a business. And if you put this 25 grand into your business one time, let's pretend we've got a great business and we can assume 20% rate of return year over year. If we did this for 25 years and we didn't touch it, we left the money in our business, your business would be worth $2.3 million. That is pretty good, right? Now let's imagine in year 5, you go in there and you take out 20 grand because you want to go somewhere, you want to do something. How much that $20,000 withdrawal out of your business, how much did that actually cost you? You're going to notice that the cost is not 20,000, but it resulted in a difference of over $920,000. That is lost opportunity cost. And this happens when opportunity cost starts working against us. This is what happens when we pay cash and we don't leverage our cash value. The biggest thing right here is that most people don't ever even notice that this is a problem because it's not a statement that you get in the mail, but it is one of the most costly mistakes financially that everyone is making out there without even knowing it. There's a couple of our clients. One of our things I love about this concept is that it'll work whether you're just getting started out or whether you've been doing this for decades. These are our good friends, Matt and Nicole. They're investors up in Michigan. And what I appreciate about most about their story is we didn't come in and dramatically change what this couple was investing in. What we came in is we changed and implemented the infinite banking system and we changed how they are investing. The biggest shift for them was they stopped relying on traditional banks for every finance need that they had, and they started becoming the bank themselves. And that's what happens when you fix the banking function first. Everything after that becomes more efficient. Here's another couple, great couple, Kent and Kelly. Their situation was a little bit different, maybe emotionally, but very common financially speaking, is when they came to us, they had been following the traditional advice for years. They were doing all of the right things, quote unquote, right things. And their sentiment was, man, we're doing a lot, but we just don't feel like we're actually getting ahead. Don't feel like we're getting any momentum. So we started looking at their situation. We liquidated, removed them from their money traps, and got them in a position with their capital where they could be more proactive instead of reactive with opportunities. This couple is awesome. They're amazing. And just in the last few years that we've been working with them, is these guys are stacking up passive income streams, just one on top of the other. And in the last, I'd say 3 years that have been working for them, they have been racing towards their financial freedom number at a crazy rate. Again, we didn't come in, excuse me. I didn't come in and change a whole lot as far as the investments and the opportunities. We actually introduced this couple to a handful of opportunities. We found two or three. There was a really good fit for them, but really the biggest work that we did with them again was not the investments, it's how they were approaching the investments. Made tremendous success. So, guys, now that I've walked through the concepts and the framework, I'm going to hand it over to Anthony so he can show you what this looks like with real life examples and some actual numbers. Anthony, it is all yours.
Want to learn what's working right now in real estate? Then don't miss Monday Night Live, happening every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Each week, we bring you expert training on real estate investing, agent attraction, lead generation, marketing, and AI-powered strategies to help you work smarter and scale faster. You'll also hear inspiring success stories and lessons learned from some of the most successful real estate leaders and investors in the industry. Whether you're a brand new agent, a seasoned investor, or building a high-performing team, there's something valuable for you every single week. Learn, network, grow. Registration is completely free. Simply visit globalinvestoragent.com to reserve your seat for an upcoming Monday Night Live session. Join us this Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and discover strategies you can put to work right away. We can't wait to see you there.
Okay, awesome. Well done, Cameron. I've taught you well, so I'm going to take over here. Now we're going to get into some of the, well, I say more of the good stuff, right? Now, some of you are analytical and you need to see the numbers before the brain will start allow you to believe anything, which I am in that category. So I'm going to give you a couple real case studies of personally how I have used my policy or policies to create passive income. Now, look at this beautiful piece of land here, right? Now, it's not beautiful because of the landscaping, because there aren't any, or the roads, because there aren't any, or even the utilities, because there aren't any. What's beautiful about it, I bought this piece of land for $2,500. Within 60 days, sold it, seller financing for 10 grand. So I started getting $250 a month just from selling this piece of land, and then I sell another one and another one and another one. So this is just one example of our land flipping business. But if we take a look at more of what I've invested in this business so far over these 3 years, I invested $265,000 of capital. Now, for that, this is what I've had so far at the beginning of the year. Most important is this is producing cash flow every month of $7,700. But also, if we take a look at everything that we do have, that's a total assets of $630,000. Now, but of course, I'm the analytical one. So people are be asking, well, what is that rate of return? Well, if we look at the capital injected into this business compared to what I have, that is a increase. That's our annual rate of return of 29%. Now, a lot of people would say that's outstanding. But here's the problem with that statement. You know, one thing people, as Cameron had talked about, some people say, well, why would I pay interest to borrow my own money? I'm going to show you why, right? Because did I actually invest $265,000 of my own capital, or did we borrow money from the insurance company, pay them interest, and so we kept the capital in our policy continuing to grow, and it is in the land business, so I have my dollars working in both places at the same time. So here's where the math starts to explode, right? The only money that we actually put in was the interest. That was $44,000 to access $265,000. And again, I'm a recovering CPA, so I do like to put in some little tax tips. I was able to deduct that $44,000 that I borrowed, but that growth inside the policy has been growing tax-free. So what is the real return when you only count the interest or the actual money that came out of my pocket, not just the original capital? So it's not 29%, it's 57%. Now, is that a normal return in traditional finance? Or is that an unreasonable return that only appears when leverage is structured this way? So now that we're done redirecting and we've leveraged our cash, now we're going to recycle it, or Cameron likes to say, rinse and repeat, but we want to do it again. So now imagine the same approach applied to a storage unit, short-term rental, or really whatever your cash flowing asset is. We're going to use real estate in part because I think that that's something that everybody on this call can easily relate. And maybe you guys or most of the people have some rental properties. Now, so what I can do, I can take that cash flow from that rental property and I can repay the insurance company, which would create more liquidity in my policy to buy another one, or I could redirect it and buy a second rental property and keep that perpetual motion on this going on and on. Now, when I do this, we can have a lot of different returns. All right, number one, I've got a return on the investment itself, but then now I also have a return on that cash flow. And remember, the policy is growing, is compounding tax-free during the entire time. So I have some invisible tax rate of return as well. And then here's one thing that is unique, and we don't really talk about it enough, and that is our legacy, right? The death benefits associated with these policies are typically far greater than what our clients have ever started with. For me personally, my death benefit is 8 times more than what I originally had in just these term policies before I implemented it. But also, this is permanent insurance, meaning term insurance will eventually stop, typically when you need it. But this is they call it whole life because it lasts your whole life, right? So I could also keep the capital compounding, control the asset. I can recycle the cash flow, increase my legacy, all without taking any additional investment risk. Because we're not telling you to invest into something different. We're just telling you that by adding one extra step, you can get these additional benefits. And the question is, if you got all these benefits, why would you ever fund deals with cash when that cash stops compounding the minute you deploy it? Now, here's one thing people will say, well, I've seen some whole life policies and I don't have any cash value for multiple years. True for typical whole life, but Cameron had said we're designing these very different. We're trying to get that death benefit low and that cash value high. And I'm going to share, here's an example of one of my actual policies that I started over 10 years ago. And again, I'm not doing it for the death benefit. I'm doing this for the cash value. And what I did to make this easier to look at, this black line here, this is what I funded into the policy. And then the green is the growth for that year. First couple years, there is a loss of liquidity, but eventually it's going to even out here. Well, now I put in $1 and I can take out what I put in, but this is when the magic starts happening. Or in those last few years, it's actually grown by double of what I had put in that year, right? Because a lot of people here are like, well, why don't I just pay cash? Well, I'm gonna give you the numbers on the reason why here in a minute, but also look at this chart here. Towards the end, you could use cash to finance your investments, but when would you ever put in $1 and be able to get $2 back? And the answer is absolutely never. But don't take our word for it. We do have a podcast, Infinite Wealth Podcast, and that we've talked about infinite banking, passive income, and then we sprinkle in some tax and legal. And also we bring in some of our clients to kind of share their stories as well. But I'm going to leave you with one more case study. I think for this audience, I'm hoping that this is what's going to hit it home. Because we tell people, invest in what you know. Right? A lot of people don't know the 401k, but you guys being in this business should understand real estate, the values, and how to find a deal. And this is an actual property of mine that I bought a few years ago. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the math. Right? It's something that you're going to hear us say often. We're going to use cash to buy it, or we're going to use the infinite banking, and we're gonna see who has more money at the end of the day. Now, we're gonna use these assumptions, meaning that we're deploying 100 grand. Now, you guys, a lot of times people tell me there's no way you can buy a house for 100 grand. It is possible. It is probably not where you live, right? But this property was in Michigan. I tell you, I just bought a property in Milwaukee, a duplex for 90. So those deals are out there, okay? But the important piece aren't if these numbers, we could argue if these numbers should be higher or lower. The key thing is we're doing two scenarios with the same data. And that's going to be a cash on cash each year of 8%. We're going to look at it for 30 years and use the assumption we're going to have appreciation at 5%. So you can put this on a multifamily syndication or buying a storage unit, but this works really well with real estate. So if we look at the numbers, 100 grand at 5% compounding for 30 years, that's 432,000. Now the cash on cash return, that is going to be 8% of 100, so 8,000. For 30 years, $240,000. We need to subtract our original investment. And so now our net profit, $572,000. I don't know, to me, that looks pretty good, okay? But it can look even better, okay? But what we're gonna do now is that's if I just use cash, but what if instead I did the infinite banking concept where I had the money in a high cash value policy, and I'm going to use it as collateral, and I'm going to pay the insurance company a interest only loan. Okay, so now the appreciation is still going to be the same. Cash on cash is still 8,000, but we also, let's not forget, we have an interest only loan, so we have to account for that. And interest rates right now are about 5.3, 5.5. So we're going to use 5.5. So the annual interest is 5,500. We got to subtract the two times 30 years is 75 grand. So cash flow much less. We subtract the investment. We have a profit of $407,000. Now, how many people are seeing this? Aha. I knew this whole infinite banking life insurance thing is a scam, right? You don't need to be a recovering CPA to know 572 is bigger than 407. Okay. But I'm missing one thing. Can anybody tell me the one thing that we're missing if you could throw that in the chat? That one thing, cash value buildup. Okay. What we need to look at, what happened to that cash value that was used as leverage in my policy? That continued to grow tax free. So we need to account for that growth of the 100 grand because it's still there and it's still growing. And if we have the assumption that it grows at 4%, we'd have $572,000 or 524 in cash value. We need to add that to the original investment. So now buying the same asset with the exact same money in, exact same thing, money coming out. The only thing is one we use cash, broke the compound interest curve, and another one we put in a policy and leverage against it. So at the first glance, it looks like we're less cash flow, but when we take it into account, the growth of our policy, we can see we're making an increase of almost 28%. So I want to ask a question to make sure that the logic here is landing, right? If you made more money, could you do more deals? Could you keep more of your money if you made 28% a return or increased return on every one of your deals? Could we build generational wealth, right? And here's the key thing, and this is the entire point. Would this change where you invest? You're not picking a different investment. You're just picking a different cash storage system before you invest. Okay. And then here, did we take on any more risk to earn that extra 28%? Absolutely not. So part of what we're doing in summary here is we want to redirect our cash flow into an account that's liquid that we own and control, right? And I will tell you, my wife was a realtor, my daughter's a realtor, so I'm very accustomed to that space. And one thing I've seen or noticed, we never know when that check's going to come in, right? So oftentimes, realtors are more apprehensive to lock money up in a money trap. You kind of want to put it in the 401k or an IRA, but then you might need it because their commissions are low. Well, this is where we set this up is you can put money aside, but also know if you need it, you can leverage against it and recycle. Okay. So, I'm going to go quickly here because I said we would be done in the hour. This is everything you get when you work with us, which we call the Infinite Banking Accelerator. Okay, because we want to make sure, like, how can somebody implement this correctly without guessing? So we're going to show you exactly what is included when you work with us. And the Banking Accelerator, you have one-on-one coaching. This is not a group call. This is a real person with either Cameron or myself that would structure this based on your goals, your timeline, your family, and deal flow. This is customized. This is not generic. Second, you're going to learn how you can add this to infinite banking to increase your returns and to lower your taxes. You're also going to get a cash flow analysis because, again, we're trying to get your passive income more than your monthly expenses. So we need to nail down to see what the monthly expenses are. And oftentimes when we do this, we can identify dollars you already had that are currently sitting idle or moving in inefficiently, we redirect them into a system. Now, for most people, this unlocks capital that they didn't even realize that they had. And then you also get a bonus. Well, we will do this for your family members, or if you're on a team, we've done that at no extra cost. Also, you're going to get lifetime access to our inner circle. This is where we have weekly office hours where you can ask a coach. We have real-time help and the ability to collaborate with other investors who are already using the system. And then this one is cool. We find deal 3, find out what kind of investor you are by taking our personalized investor DNA assessment. And then we will review your profile against different asset classes, so you can see which one to avoid and then which ones to lean into. So if you were to add all this stuff up, okay, the total is about $6,400. And because you're here today, we're not going to charge you $64,000. All right, we're not even going to charge you $1,000. What we're doing right now is we are allowing some people through this webinar to do a test drive here for free. Okay, now, but you have to enroll. And before I show you how to enroll, I want to be transparent about one thing. We don't accept everyone. And because this only works for people who are coachable and who are serious about implementation, they're just not browsing for ideas. So rather than just letting anybody in, we do require a short application. And here's how it works. Okay, so you pull out your phone, you take out this, you can scan this QR code. You're going to fill out a short form so we can make sure this is a fit for both of us. If you qualify, you will book on a time with Cameron. Or if you're lucky, you will end up on my calendar. And if you don't qualify, we're going to send you some free resources to help you get there. And I do like to be upfront, right? Especially since we're not charging for this. We do want to help people, but we are not a nonprofit. Okay, we do, if we go through this process and it makes sense for you to get one of these policies, we get paid from the insurance company. So we get paid for that. Also, we have a passive income lab, which is a 13-week group coaching that helps people become a better investor. We do charge for that as well. And we have a few minutes here for frequently asked questions. There's typically a few that we normally get. So I'm going to go ahead and let's do this one. Common question. Don't you have to be young for this to work? Okay. I get it because we're using life insurance. But remember, like as Cameron had said, this is designed very different. This is a high cash value, low death benefit. I just put in a policy for a 72-year-old, and I have a 68-year-old as well. And the difference is we did the math, right? We did a policy on a 20-year-old, 40-year-old, and 60-year-old, both with the same premium. 60-year-old, well, the 20-year-old had more death benefit. 60-year-old had more cash value. And that's why we're doing this, right? For the cash value, even 10 years later, 40-year-old was in first, 6-year-old in second, right? But each year, the difference is minimal. Now, the big difference is the death benefit, but for the cash value, it's going to be minimal. And if somebody is unhealthy and they can't get approval, we will constantly look for a spouse or business partner. I will stop my yapping, but we can do some Q&A, and I'll leave the QR code up here.
Hold on, Anthony. Catherine did have a question where she was talking about age, and she said, at what age does this not be a valued option? Anthony addressed it. I thought he did a good job. I might add on there for you, Catherine, is that um, he referenced a couple ages there. I'll add that I did have a gentleman right now that is 82 years old that reached out, loved the idea, and he's uninsurable at that age, but we're actually putting a policy on his adult daughter. She is 50, mid 50s. And so he owns the policy. He has all ownership rights to the cash value. And so that's a cool little wrinkle that we can do if someone is interested. So awesome. Any other questions that you guys have? We're happy to address them.
Now, Robert had asked the returns in the policy.
That was a answer to your question
Okay.
asking what
Oh,
did we
okay.
miss?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anthony, let me ask you this as we kind of wrap up here is I think you mentioned kind of who's it for or who this might be for. I always like to ask this is who's this not for, in your opinion?
This is not for somebody who's living beyond their means. If you're having to hit some credit cards to really pay the bills, there's some bigger issues that need to be addressed before you start saving. But also, we take an educational approach. This isn't, if you just want to just write a check and give to a financial advisor and hope that it's going to be there, we're not a good fit. We want people who want to take control of their finances and their ultimate retirement. So we provide education to empower you to be able to make good choices. You want to add anything on who it's not for, Cam?
That's the point I almost always make, right? Is that there's some people I'll meet with and they are more than content to kind of write that check and just hand it over to like a financial advisor. That's not really what we're doing here, right? Is we're educating you guys how to take back control. And so, no, nothing to add. I would just echo it, right? Is what we're going to help you do. Maybe I'll add this is that our focus when we work with somebody is not the cash value piece. It's not like how much cash value can we create in a policy. It's actually like the monthly income piece is like how much do you need in passive income monthly to take the relief or take some pressure off your earned income and allow you to step away. So I'll add that. But there is a question that came in from PF. He says, "What's the minimum and maximum of the initial investment?" Pastor, you want to take that?
What I would say is this is savings plan, not an investment, but we can leverage against it to do investments. Uh, what I found is the minimum for this to work, or because the more we put in, the more we can leverage out. Okay, so I would say the minimum is 10 times your age per month. So if you're 40 years old, that'd be $400 a month. But what we do when we go through our financial analysis and cash flow analysis, we look at your money traps. So what we will do is say, based on your finances, this is what you're capable of doing. And so this is what we tell people. This is what you should be moving over to create passive income. Because we went through your money traps and your personal profit and loss. How much of that, and sometimes that's money they didn't even realize that they had access to, then they will tell us how much of that they want to put into a policy. Oftentimes, when people hear this, like, is it too good to be true? Like, let me put my toe in the water, and then they're maybe do half of what they're capable of, try it out, and then maybe they will come back. But the bottom line is we want to make sure that this is a good fit for you. Oftentimes, we've told people, hey, you have some other things going on. Let's maybe, or I tell you, here's one thing. People, oh, this is great. I want to put, $2,000 a month in here. Cool. but they haven't saved any money for the last few years. If we do that, we're setting them up for failure. Why don't you practice for a little bit? Let's make sure that 2 grand is the right number, and then we can come back in a few months later and then go ahead and start the process.
Yeah. I have another question too. Some of the some of the agents on the team here tonight have clients who are probably very well off. And I know one of our agents today, she's not in class right now. Rachel Sawano has a client who wants to sell her California oceanfront condo. So imagine what that would be worth. But she's afraid of the taxes, what's going to happen to her tax time. And it's an invested property, so she can't use the homeowner's exclusion. But I and I don't know all the details, but I've seen where people um, would set up a trust, put a property in the trust, and not just a simple land trust, but an actual, a little more complex trust. And then when the proceeds come in, they're directed to a whole life policy right out of the gate. So she's never taken control of the money. It's being directed to the whole life policy. Have you guys ever seen anything like that, or is that I know it's probably a little bit off the beaten path, but
Yes, there's some of those trusts, some are charitable remainder trusts. There's a lot of different trusts out there, and whole life can be used in that instance. Also, we do have, well, and actually, this is a good plug. We're doing a webinar in September where we have a tax strategist who's coming in, and he has a strategy where you invest 100 grand, you're
Mhm,
getting a tax deduction for 500 with
mhm.
some passive income, and that loss can go against somebody's W-2. And I'm assuming everybody in here is a 1099, but
Mhm.
also a lot of your clients have some of these questions and have some of these tax issues, and so we can help with that. We didn't do more of an intro or a background, but I alluded to earlier, I call myself a recovering CPA. I've been a CPA for over 30 years, uh, and this is a lot more fun than doing tax returns. So we are familiar with some advanced tax strategies. That's not our lane anymore, but we
Right.
work with
Mhm.
additional CPAs or tax strategists who do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. But the bigger picture too is Connie may have already signed off. Um, some of these folks have clients that just in principle I think need to be introduced to this. So is there any words of wisdom you can share with the agents here tonight? And then everybody's going to get the recording tomorrow too. So it's going to go out to like 70,000 people or something. But um, let's say an agent, like the PF has a client or two up in Boston that are somewhat well off and they can take advantage of this and it can be a big benefit for them. Instead of PF trying to persuade them or convince them or whatever, I mean, if he just had a um, few simple words to say, or what's the best way for him to direct those people to you guys? You know, help them with, buy a property, sell a property, utilizing the strategy, and then of course PF gets a commission out of it, and these folks get a, huge benefit. Mm.
I might just bring up a question wise and maybe give them a little bit and just say, with the proceeds of the sale, how would you like to be more efficient with your money?
Mhm.
And then from there, I would not put the onus on you guys to try to explain the infinite banking concept. Maybe just give them a little tease and then send them to an easy one is our podcast. It's Infinite Wealth Podcast. We have over 300 episodes. Anthony has been doing this for a while. He alluded to it. We've got a whole bunch of episodes that talk about infinite banking. The second resource that we have is our online course. If you guys are interested, maybe put a 10 in the chat if you guys want access to our online course, I'm happy to provide that to you guys free of charge. So you
Hmm.
guys can jump in there and get access, look around. We got a bunch of information in there. So those are two really easy places to go. The third one, I would say, happy to give them a link directly to schedule a meeting with us. That would be easy as
Yeah.
well. Anthony, if you want to add anything.
Well, I will say, uh, generous offer, Cameron, because we do typically charge for the course. Okay. But we need a way, whoever put the 10 in, we need to know their email address to somehow to communicate with them.
Okay.
So maybe
Good
we
point.
could get that take a screenshot and get that from Gary later. But we'd also want the people who are recording um, need to get access to that too. In that course, because I mean, we, we tried to do what we could, visually here, but
Mhm.
I would say this infinite banking thing, I know I'm selling it, so you got to take everything I say with a grain of salt, okay?
Okay.
I'm not trying to oversell it, but what I think you owe it to yourself and your family to go a little deeper in this and
Mhm.
evaluate whether this is for you or not. This isn't for everybody, okay? But at least, you've probably heard, well, whole life is this, whole life is that. Those are all opinions. I challenge you to come up with your own opinion. You may agree with them, okay?
Mhm.
But in that course, you're going to have the tools. We have IBC 101 that's going to give you infinite banking at a high level. And we're going to, again, I'm a numbers guy. We have the math. Well, what if, we set aside a certain amount of money to buy a property in cash, or what if we put that in a policy and we
Mhm.
we really dive a little deeper than we did today. So particularly if you're in this space, in the real estate space, you owe it to yourself to check it out. Then you could say, you know what, this ain't for me. But at least you came up with your own opinion. You're not relying on others. And I
Mhm.
will say, I've worked a lot with realtors. Even that's how I grew my tax practice because my wife was a realtor. So I go
Mhm.
around to her broker and I do these webinars to do an S corp
Mhm.
and all that stuff. But most realtors do not treat this like a business.
Mhm.
And we need to have some money set aside. We need to pay taxes. That commission is never guaranteed. We need to have some money in reserves. And what I've seen, too many realtors, well, some of them are buying the fancy cars, right? Because there's that
Mhm.
look that we need to portray, right? But as I said earlier, they're apprehensive to lock money up in an IRA or 401k because they never know when the next deal is. But here's a way that you can save for retirement, but it's still liquid. And one
Mhm.
thing, let me just, I tell Gary, you're right. I could really talk all day about this, like Cameron said, for 2.5 hours. Another
Mhm.
benefit, particularly for your high income earners, like this individual with this mansion, right? She's going to have a pile of capital. She should be worried about taxes and she should worry about asset protection,
Yeah.
amongst other things, and then how you're going to use it. One thing we do, we have what's called a one and done policy, where I'm working with a client who just sold his business and he's sitting on a pile of money. We're just moving it from his bank account into a policy. That's it. He's just making one transfer. And now all that money is going to grow tax free. It's liquid. And depending on the state, it can be asset protected.
Mhm.
Most states have some level of asset protection. I'm going to tell you, California is the worst. Okay.
Yeah.
But Florida, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, New York, probably majority of the states, it's completely level of asset protection. And also, you guys as being realtors, I'm assuming you want to be seen as a resource. A lot of people
Mhm.
may have heard this, but maybe they haven't heard all the details. And maybe you could be the one to enlighten them, because now they have all this cash. We're going to tell them they need to invest it. So they need to go back to you because you're the real estate expert. So they can go buy some investment properties.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing for sure, ever since I was a young man in college and, becoming familiar with some pretty wealthy people, including some in my own family, one of the common things I noticed, and it wasn't something that was like publicly known, they didn't brag about it, talk about it. They all used whole life, not just for protecting, taking care of their families. That they see a lot of them were business builders, business owners, and if they get hit by the proverbial bus, typically the business would die along with the person. So they would use the policy number one to keep the family and the lifestyle they were used to. But while they were alive, they all used it, leveraged against it, borrowed against it to do other investing. It was one of the biggest things because the money, it's the principal balance, or I guess the cash value inside the policy was growing tax free, right? It's tax free, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge for wealthy people. I mean, you could be talking about 25%, that you're saving, right? They're in 25% tax bracket, you know? So that's a huge bonus. So that was always my story. I just paid attention to what these guys were doing, and I mean, I learned from them. Thank goodness. And nowadays, some of them are, we play golf together. So in fact, one of them's on the team. So he got tired of being retired and said, I want to have something fun to do. And I said, well, this is about the most fun thing I've ever done. Come on in. And he lives 10 minutes from me. So we pretend we know how to play pickleball and golf and stuff like that. So, but
You
any
know,
case,
how many times have we heard about Elon Musk or Bezos where they're not paying taxes, right? They have all this stock, they're not selling it, they're borrowing against it.
mhm,
We have the same tax code that the wealthy do, but they're
mhm,
the ones implementing it. You
yeah,
might not have a company you can borrow against, but you have the ability to do the next best thing is borrowing against your own capital.
mhm, yeah. So, well, I'll tell you what, you guys did an excellent job tonight, by the way. I mean, you're great teachers. I mean, when you taught the first time, it was really good, but I can clearly you're mastering the whole art of this. It really is. It's fun to watch, and the subject. I mean, it couldn't be any more relevant for people who are open-minded, and for those who are listening right here tonight, thinking of their clients and their client base. Um, you could be helping a lot of people protect their wealth and grow their wealth, and you could be earning commissions while you're at it. So yeah. Hey guys, any more questions? On? Okay. Um, uh, Cameron and Anthony, if you want to, Sugar's going to send out the recording of this usually later on Tuesday, sometimes early Wednesday.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to make sure she includes in the email with the recording, and anything you want her to not put in there? Like something that's really only for, a live audience, that kind of thing. And if you want to think about it, just email me before the night's over and copy her. So I'll
Okay.
know. Yeah, go ahead.
I think this video is good to go. We don't need to cut anything. But what we could do, Gary, is we could include maybe some more links. Somebody wants to learn about the podcast. They want to schedule a call. I mean, if they want to learn, that's what we're given the resources to help them.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it, guys. I mean, hopefully it won't be 5 years again before you see each other. So,
Yeah, no kidding.
I do plan on getting out again and traveling more like I used to. It's just not the pandemic and some other things that, home taking care of people.
Yeah.
And I'm finally got my time freedom back, and ready to have some fun.
Okay.
So,
Great.
yeah. Okay. Listen, everybody, if you could give Cameron and Anthony a pat on the back, a hand raise, or even in the chat. I know a lot of people have already signed off, and this has really been. I know you guys are busy, and this is very much appreciated what you did tonight, and especially the offer you made to everybody. These guys are like family to me, and I love them, and you just treated them like they were your own. So thank you very much.
We're honored to be here. But if you want to get that financial freedom like on Cameron's shirt,
Mhm.
it's going to take action, not just knowledge. And maybe that next step might be to learn infinite banking.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll even buy a t-shirt because I know if I wear that t-shirt, people are going to ask me, what does that mean? That's a great way to get a conversation started. Can I get
Gary,
an
I
amen on
thought
that?
Cameron said he was going to mail you one.
Really?
Last time we spoke, right?
It's in the mail. I
He's
think
giving
it's
away
sent to his
free
RV.
courses.
Yeah. Send it to his RV. I don't know where it's at. But.
There you go. All right. Well,
Thank
listen,
you, guys.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. You
Thank
guys
you.
all take care of yourselves. God bless you and all your loved ones. And I will see you on the next class. And I'll see you on your one-on-ones. Please set up your one-on-ones, guys. Don't forget. Okay.
Take care.
Okay. Good night. Good night,
Take care.
everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for watching Monday Night Live. Consider subscribing. Agents, want to learn more? Schedule a call with Gary using the link in the description.